Ladies and gentlemen, picture watching a person change, not all at once, but step by step, into someone able to cause deep emotional ruin. It does not occur in a single night. It starts silently with a weak ego hiding behind confidence and ends with a cold ability to control and be cruel. The road from self-obsession to psychopathy is a psychological fall marked by small shifts in who they are, their morals, and their goals. When you understand these shifts, you can see the danger long before it breaks out. Seeing the signs is not paranoia, it is self-protection. And sometimes it is the understanding that saves you from becoming a victim of someone else's mind games. The first key point starts with realizing that the shift towards psychopathic ways rarely begins with obvious harshness. Instead, it starts with the quiet building of a fake self. This fake self appears when a person feels deep down that they are not good enough, unseen, or without value. Rather than facing these painful inner truths, they build mental armor made of boosted confidence, charm, and acting superior. It is not made overnight. It is practiced, strengthened, and polished. Over time, they care more about the mask than the person underneath. And this mask becomes their main method for moving through the world. This fake self acts as both a shield and a stage. It guards them from shame, feeling weak, and the fear of being just average. But it also needs an audience. The person starts to hunger for admiration the way a starving body hungers for food. Their sense of self begins to rely on approval, praise, and attention. Without it, they feel exposed, empty, and even threatened because they cannot handle the pain of being real. They hold on to the illusion with growing desperation. At first, the fake self may look safe, confidence, drive, even charm. Many people around them might look up to it. But beneath this fake front lies a growing gap from reality. The person stops asking who they truly are and instead focuses on who they must look like to feel valuable. They become actors in their own lives, performing instead of engaging, impressing instead of connecting. The mask becomes so important that any challenge to it feels like a personal attack. This is the moment where the seed of danger is planted. Because once someone decides that the truth of themselves is not enough, they start to treat honesty as something optional. They begin shaping their identity based on what gets the biggest reactions. Their stories become exaggerated, their wins blown up, their failures made small or hidden. The more they lean on this outer creation, the further they get from true self-awareness. Over time, the fake self demands support at any cost. Relationships change from equal sharing to one-sided support. Anyone who questions them becomes a danger. Anyone who looks up to them becomes a supply. The person's emotional life starts to flatten because real emotion threatens the illusion. Being open becomes unbearable. So, it is swapped for defensiveness, denial, or anger. What makes this stage so tricky is that it feels mentally necessary to the narcissist. They believe this made-up identity is the only way to survive, to be respected, and to be seen. But the deeper they commit to it, the more they damage their ability to form real bonds. The mask slowly eats away at the person wearing it. This first phase sets the ground for everything that follows. Without a fake self, big-headedness cannot grow. Without a fake self, emotional distance cannot take hold. Without a fake self, manipulation has no excuse. The building of this identity is the quiet start of a darker change, and it is dangerous exactly because it looks on the surface like confidence until it no longer is. The second stage happens when the weak image created by the fake self starts asking for more energy than normal support can give. A person who once felt happy with simple admiration now finds it is not enough. Their inner emptiness grows hungrier, craving not just approval but surrender, recognition, and unquestioned praise. A sense of grandiosity does not just show up, it blows up slowly like a balloon filled with insecurity rather than air. The individual starts to believe they are special, meant to be above the rules that everyone else follows. This belief might start quietly, but it gets louder each time their ego is fed and never challenged. Grandiosity becomes the emotional armor they wear to avoid facing their deep fears of being unimportant. Instead of admitting their weak spots, they hold on tight to a boosted sense of importance. Every compliment becomes proof of their superiority. Every win, no matter how small, becomes a sign of their uniqueness. And every criticism becomes a wound they cannot handle, not because it is true, but because it threatens the weak illusion they are desperately trying to keep up. As their ego expands, the person begins to change what they expect from the world. What once felt like appreciation now feels like a debt others owe them. They expect admiration without earning it, loyalty without giving it, and attention without giving any back. Their relationships begin to tilt, turning into uneven dynamics where they demand the center stage. They overstate their role in every situation, telling stories in which they are the hero, the victim, or the genius. Anything that keeps them lifted above the ordinary. This phase also marks a shift in how they read the behavior of others. Neutral actions suddenly feel disrespectful. A simple disagreement becomes an attack. A suggestion becomes criticism because their blown-up self-image requires constant protection. They become super sensitive to anything that challenges it. They might react with rage, pulling away, or cold rejection, all to save the feeling of superiority they have come to depend on. The growth of grandiosity also changes how they chase success. Achievement stops being a goal and becomes a weapon. They chase wins not out of passion or meaning, but to support their story of being special. Even when they succeed, the happiness is short-lived, quickly replaced by the need for a bigger crowd, louder praise, and a higher pedestal. Success becomes a habit that never satisfies, only makes their hunger stronger. What makes this phase especially dangerous is that the grandiosity starts to feel real to them. They no longer see their exaggeration as a performance. They see it as the truth. And once they accept this twisted identity as reality, they lose the ability to view themselves clearly. Their self-image drifts so far from their actual character that honesty becomes impossible. Their ego grows while their self-awareness shrinks. This growth of grandiosity marks a turning point. It pushes them further from true connection, deeper into entitlement, and closer to the emotional distance that defines the next phase. This is where the narcissist stops seeking approval and starts demanding worship, believing fully that they deserve it simply because they exist. The third phase starts when their big ego can no longer quiet the growing emptiness inside, and the narcissist pulls back into a colder, more calculating way of dealing with others. Pulling away emotionally does not occur in one moment. It forms slowly like frost spreading across a window pane. The person starts shutting down parts of themselves that once felt open. Empathy, regret, tenderness, curiosity. These emotions are swapped for a sharper, more strategic mindset. Instead of asking how people feel, they start asking how people can be used. Every interaction shifts from human connection to quiet testing. They learn to view others as tools, stepping stones, or roadblocks. A friend becomes a source of praise. A partner becomes a supply of emotional work. A coworker becomes competition or a resource. They stop seeing individuals as whole, complex people and instead reduce them to functions. This shift allows them to avoid discomfort, responsibility, and openness. They no longer risk real attachment because real attachment requires being real. And being real threatens the illusion they have built. This emotional distancing does not always look cold at first. In public, they might still smile, flirt, charm, and act warm very well. But their warmth is no longer rooted in connection. It is a tactic. They show emotion not to express themselves, but to get a response that helps them. Their interactions become more like business deals. They calculate how much they must give in order to get what they want, whether that is approval, admiration, control, or obedience. Inside, their emotional world becomes disturbingly flat. Joy feels quiet unless it is tied to winning or attention. Sadness is rarely admitted because it feels like weakness. Guilt loses its power because guilt would require seeing others as real and valuable. Instead, they begin to feel annoyed when others express needs, frustrated when others ask for fairness, and threatened when others question their behavior. Their emotional distance allows them to justify selfishness because they no longer see others as deserving of care. As this emotional withdrawal gets deeper, something even more worrying happens. They start to believe they are safer without feelings. Being open becomes the same as danger in their mind. Empathy becomes a useless weight. Compassion feels like something that slows them down or exposes them. Their world narrows into a self-centered circle, where they put efficiency, control, and personal gain above treating people right. This distance sets the stage for more harmful behaviors. Once someone stops feeling connected to others, it becomes easier to manipulate them. It becomes easier to lie, dismiss, or use them. The person convinces themselves that others would not understand them anyway, so there is no reason to care about their impact. Their inner story becomes colder, more self-justifying, and increasingly cut off from moral responsibility. This phase represents a critical mental shift. It is not yet psychopathy, but it is the bridge. It is the moment where the narcissist stops needing people emotionally and begins using them as tools. When empathy fades and calculation takes over, the fall speeds up, and the potential for deeper harm grows greatly. The fourth stage comes out when emotional distance becomes so normal that manipulation no longer feels like a moral violation, but a practical solution. What once might have caused guilt now feels almost natural, even justified. This is the point where trickery, twisting facts, and psychological games become tools the narcissist uses with growing confidence. They start trying out ways to twist reality, testing how far they can push people, how convincingly they can reshape the truth, and how effectively they can keep control by controlling how things are seen. Manipulation starts softly, a small lie to avoid taking blame, a partial truth to get sympathy, a twist of words to make someone doubt their memory. They discover that manipulating people gives a sense of power and stability. Power because others become easier to influence. Stability because the illusion of superiority stays safe. What begins as small acts of emotional self-protection gradually turns into a patterned behavior. The narcissist learns that if reality does not protect their ego, they can simply redesign it. Over time, manipulation becomes their standard way of handling conflict. Instead of admitting mistakes, they change the subject. Instead of solving problems, they create confusion. They might use guilt to keep someone obedient. After everything I have done for you, this is how you treat me? They might use projection to shift the blame. You are the one who is being selfish. They might use charm to distract from the truth, or silence a confrontation with a sudden wave of affection. These tactics are not random. They are strategic responses designed to keep dominance and protect their weak self-image. As manipulation becomes a habit, the narcissist begins to view it not as lying, but as a necessity. They convince themselves that others are too sensitive, too dramatic, or too unaware to handle honesty. They excuse their behavior by believing that the world is a competition and that everyone manipulates in some form. So why shouldn't they? This moral decay is subtle but deep. Each time they justify their actions, they step further away from honesty and deeper into entitlement. The people around them often feel the impact long before realizing what is happening. They may sense confusion after conversations, questioning their memory, doubting their gut feelings, or feeling deeply guilty for no reason. The narcissist uses these weak spots like levers. They push when it helps them, pull when obedience weakens, and retreat when being exposed threatens them. Their manipulation works like a psychological smokescreen, making it harder for others to understand what is real. What makes this phase particularly dangerous is its invisibility. Manipulation does not always look dramatic. Often it appears polite, smart, logical, even loving. The narcissist may present themselves as the victim, the misunderstood one, the only rational person in the room. Behind this act lies a growing distance from moral responsibility. They no longer seek peace or understanding. They seek control. By this stage, their moral compass is broken. They no longer judge actions based on right and wrong, but on advantage and disadvantage. Manipulation becomes both a shield and a weapon, allowing them to keep the illusion of superiority while quietly breaking down the emotional stability of those around them. This normalizing of dishonesty paves the path toward darker behaviors, setting the stage for the coldness and dominance typical of the final phase. The fifth phase starts when trickery, distance, and huge ego mix together into something much more unsafe, an identity that operates with a chilling lack of regret. At this point, the individual is no longer protecting a weak ego. They are acting from a place of dominance, using people not just to keep their illusion, but to satisfy deeper urges for control. The earlier phases were about survival and self-protection. This phase is about showing power, shaping outcomes, and emotionally breaking others with clear intention. This is where narcissistic traits sharpen into psychopathic behaviors, not always clinically, but in the way they relate to the world. What makes this moment so alarming is that the person no longer sees their behavior as harmful. They have created a story that justifies everything they do. If someone gets hurt, it is because they deserved it or were too sensitive or stood in the way. Responsibility disappears into thin air. They convince themselves they are the victim of other people's failures, and therefore their actions are always rational, even necessary. This shift grants them permission to act without guilt, without waiting, and without thinking about long-term results. Their emotional landscape becomes colder, narrower. Empathy, already weakened in earlier phases, now feels pointless. They may understand how others feel, but they no longer care. Compassion becomes a bother. Regret becomes non-existent. They move through relationships like a person passing through rooms, taking what they want, leaving a mess behind, and feeling nothing as they close the door. Their sense of self becomes inflated not just by praise, but by winning. They feel powerful when they can control outcomes, lie without being caught, or emotionally shake someone who once trusted them. In this phase, cruelty does not always appear openly. It often hides behind charm, logic, or calm explanation. They may insult someone softly in a way that sounds reasonable. They may hold back affection on purpose, knowing exactly how deeply it hurts. They may use truth as a weapon, not to connect, but to harm. They may create situations that trap others emotionally, then watch from a distance as the person struggles. The intent becomes more purposeful. The emotional distance becomes more complete. The danger lies not only in their actions, but in their confidence. They believe they are untouchable, smarter, more aware, more deserving. The earlier insecurity that fed their narcissism becomes buried under layers of self-created myths. They adopt a mindset where people exist for their benefit, and when someone no longer provides value, they drop them effortlessly. This coldness is often shocking to those who once saw glimpses of vulnerability in them because now those traces are gone. This final phase represents a full fall into moral detachment. They may not fit the clinical definition of a psychopath, but their behavior mirrors key traits: lack of empathy, absence of guilt, using others, lying, and emotional control. The change is complete not when they harm someone, but when they feel nothing about it. The shift from narcissist to predator becomes real, and those around them feel the cost most deeply. The sixth key point shows the uneasy truth that these phases do not merely describe an individual's fall. They reveal a pattern that deeply affects everyone around them. By the time a narcissist reaches the edge of psychopathic behavior, the change is not only inside, it becomes a lived experience for those caught in their circle. This stage is defined by impact. It shows how the traits that have hardened through the earlier phases now shape relationships, environments, and emotional realities in ways that feel both calculated and damaging. At this point, the person's behavior no longer swings between vulnerability and arrogance. Instead, their actions become steady, predictable in their coldness, and disturbingly purposeful. The absence of guilt has settled into their personality like concrete. They no longer question the morality of their decisions because they have formed a worldview where morality doesn't matter unless it helps them. They operate with an inner logic that puts control over connection, gain over fairness, and dominance over mutual respect. This stage is marked by a remarkable clarity in their manipulation. They choose targets carefully, focusing on individuals who are kind, accommodating, or eager to understand. They sense weak spots the way hunters sense weakness, and they press into those emotional soft spots with precision. Their behavior becomes more strategic. They know how to provoke, when to pull back, when to charm, and when to strike. Nothing they do is accidental anymore. Their emotional distance and sharpened instincts create a mix that feels almost impossible to reason with. People around them begin to experience emotional whiplash. One moment they are presented with warmth or logic, the next they are faced with cold indifference or subtle cruelty. This unevenness is intentional. It keeps others off balance, questioning themselves, searching for stability in someone who has no intention of offering it. Over time, this pattern eats away at confidence, twists reality, and drains emotional energy. The narcissist thrives in this imbalance because it gives them quiet power over the emotional landscape. This final phase also reveals how deeply they have abandoned accountability. When confronted, they deflect, deny, or attack. They may make up stories, twist conversations, or shift blame so convincingly that even the truth begins to feel uncertain. They treat consequences as obstacles to get around rather than lessons to learn from. Their lack of regret becomes clear in how quickly they drop people once they no longer provide admiration, control, or use. The ease with which they detach is one of the clearest signs that the transformation has reached its most harmful stage. Yet behind their apparent power lies a hollow reality. Their relationships lack real closeness, their victories lack real fulfillment, and their dominance lacks emotional depth. Everything they build is like a business deal, fragile and temporary. But they do not feel the emptiness because the emotions required to recognize it have long been shut down. This final key point highlights the ultimate cost of their change. The damage they cause becomes intentional. The empathy they once pretended to have disappears completely, and the people who love them are left navigating the aftermath of a connection that was never truly shared.